This story is titled, My Cousin Didn't Want to Invite Me to His Wedding Because I Knew the Truth That Could Destroy His Marriage, but I Had Other Plans. Hey everyone, I'm 29 years old now, and this story happened about 6 years ago. I've been holding on to this for a long time, but I'm finally ready to share what happened. Fair warning, this is going to be a long post, but I promise it's worth sticking around for the ending. This story is about my older brother Marcus, who has always been the family's golden boy. You know the type, good-looking, charming, and somehow manages to get away with absolutely everything. Meanwhile, the younger sibling gets blamed for breathing wrong. That was my reality for 24 years until I finally reached my breaking point and decided I'd had enough. We both work at our family's construction company, though work is a generous term when it comes to Marcus. I actually work there, handling the day-to-day operations, managing projects, and dealing with the real responsibilities. Marcus just shows up occasionally, schmoozes with clients over expensive lunches, and then takes credit for everything I accomplish. My dad has been promising to hand the business over to Marcus since we were kids, because obviously the older son deserves everything by birthright, right? The whole situation came to a head at Marcus's engagement party last summer. My parents went completely overboard for the occasion. They rented a massive white tent for the backyard, hired fancy catering that probably cost more than most people's weddings, and invited what felt like half the town. Nothing but the absolute best for their precious firstborn son. The entire event probably cost more than I make in 8 months. But when it comes to Marcus, money has never been an object for my parents. Marcus's fiancée Jessica was there looking absolutely gorgeous in this stunning blue dress. She's honestly a smart, accomplished woman who works as a marketing coordinator downtown. She has her own apartment, her own successful career, and her own independent life. Everything that Marcus pretends to respect but actually can't stand because he needs to control every aspect of his relationships. From the moment I arrived at the party, something felt distinctly off about the whole situation. The usual family dynamics were certainly in play. Marcus holding court in the center of everything, relatives hanging on his every word like he was delivering the Sermon on the Mount, and mom and dad beaming with pride like he'd just been elected president. But underneath all the celebration, there was this unmistakable tension, like everyone was performing just a little too hard to convince themselves everything was perfect. I noticed Jessica kept checking her phone throughout the evening. She wasn't being obvious about it, just quick, furtive glances when she thought nobody was looking. Every time Marcus laughed too loudly or launched into another one of his self-aggrandizing stories, she would flinch slightly like she was counting down the minutes until she could escape this charade. What really caught my attention was how she kept looking at me. Quick glances across the table at first, then longer, more desperate stares when Marcus was distracted by his adoring audience. There was something genuinely desperate in her eyes, like she was drowning and desperately looking for someone to throw her a lifeline. The speeches started during dessert, and naturally Dad went first. He launched into this heartfelt monologue about how incredibly proud he was of Marcus, gushing about how Marcus was destined to take over the construction company someday, and how he'd always known Marcus was meant for great things. It was the standard proud father speech, but the way he delivered it, with such conviction and obvious favoritism, really stung. Here I was, sitting literally 10 feet away from him, and it was like I didn't even exist in his vision of the family's future. After 24 years of being treated as invisible, you'd think I'd be used to it by now, but it never gets any easier to swallow. Then Marcus stood up for his turn at the microphone, and I had to sit through more of his trademark fake humility about finding your soulmate and building a future together. He had his arm draped possessively around Jessica's shoulders, and I could clearly see her trying not to pull away from his touch. The entire performance made me physically sick to my stomach, but I kept my mouth shut and played the role of the supportive younger brother, just like I always had. The praise continued to flow from every corner of the tent. Uncle Pete was gushing enthusiastically about Marcus's supposedly brilliant project numbers and profit margins. Cousin Jim couldn't stop talking about what a natural-born leader Marcus was and how clients just gravitated toward his charisma. The whole extended family was completely eating up this carefully crafted image of Marcus as the successful businessman, the perfect son, and the guy who could absolutely do no wrong. If only they knew what I knew about their golden boy. You see, I'd been keeping a devastating secret for months, something that could destroy not just Marcus personally, but potentially bring down our entire family business in the process. Marcus had been stealing from the company, not just skimming a little off the top here and there, but running elaborate embezzlement schemes, falsifying official records, and conducting outright fraud with our clients. And it wasn't just about the money he was stealing. It was about the absolutely disgusting methods he was using to do it. He'd been taking married clients to high-end strip clubs and charging their companies $70,000 for projects that actually cost us $40,000 to complete, then pocketing the $30,000 difference. He was using the company credit card for entertainment expenses that would make your head spin with their audacity. I'd discovered this completely by accident about 4 months earlier when I was working late one evening and needed to check some invoices for a major commercial job we were handling. Marcus had carelessly left his computer unlocked and sitting there logged into the company's financial accounts, with transaction records that made absolutely no sense from a legitimate business perspective. I found payments to so-called consulting firms that turned out to be upscale strip clubs when I looked them up. There were cash withdrawals that didn't match any legitimate business expenses I could find documentation for. At first, I thought maybe it was just Marcus being characteristically careless with paperwork and record-keeping. But the more deeply I dug into the financial records, the clearer it became that my supposedly perfect older brother was systematically robbing our family blind, while using the stolen money to corrupt clients and artificially inflate his project success numbers. So I started methodically documenting everything I could find. I took screenshots of incriminating transactions, printed out suspicious receipts, and made copies of bank statements that showed the pattern of theft. I built myself a comprehensive file that would send Marcus to prison for years if I ever decided to use it as evidence. I wasn't necessarily planning to destroy him at that point. I just wanted some insurance in case Marcus tried to screw me over again the way he'd been doing my entire life. But sitting at that engagement party, watching him play the role of the perfect son while I remained completely invisible to my family, watching Jessica look more miserable and trapped by the minute, I started seriously thinking that maybe it was finally time to stop being the family doormat and stand up for myself. The breaking point came when Marcus stood up to deliver his own speech about love and commitment. He launched into more of his typical bullshit about how incredibly lucky he was to find someone like Jessica, talking about their bright future together while the whole table hung on his every word. The entire time he was speaking, Jessica's phone suddenly buzzed on the table. She glanced down at the screen, and I watched her face go completely white, then flush bright red, then drain of all color again. She looked up at Marcus with an expression I'd never seen before, then at my mom, and finally, her eyes locked directly onto mine. I could see the exact moment she made her decision. She was done pretending that everything was fine. "Actually, Marcus," Jessica said, standing up slowly and deliberately, her voice cutting through his speech like a knife. "Before we celebrate any further, there's something everyone at this table should know." The entire table went dead silent in an instant. You could have heard a pin drop on the grass 20 feet away. Marcus's confident smile froze on his face like someone had suddenly hit the pause button on a movie, and I could see the confusion and panic starting to creep into his eyes. My mom immediately jumped up from her seat, her face tight with that familiar look she gets when someone's about to embarrass the family in public. "Jessica, sweetheart, maybe we should discuss whatever this is privately," she said, in that tone she uses when she's trying to maintain control of a situation. "No," Jessica said firmly, her voice getting stronger and more resolute. "I'm completely done with private conversations and keeping secrets to protect people who don't deserve it." Marcus tried to put his hand on her arm, probably thinking he could deploy his usual charm offensive to smooth over whatever was about to happen. "Babe, whatever's wrong, I'm sure we can work it out," he said with that fake concerned voice he uses when he's trying to manipulate someone. Jessica jerked away from his touch like he was on fire. "Don't you dare touch me," she said with such venom that even I was surprised. That's when I knew that shit was about to get very, very real. Jessica wasn't the type to make dramatic scenes or air dirty laundry in public settings. She was normally composed, diplomatic, and conflict avoidant. For her to stand up at Marcus's engagement party in front of the entire extended family and start dropping truth bombs, something absolutely major must have just happened. "I found the text messages," she announced, her voice loud enough and clear enough for everyone at the table to hear every single word. "All of them. The ones to your brother's girlfriend Victoria, the hotel receipts, all the lies about working late when you were really sneaking around meeting up with her behind my back." The silence that followed was absolutely beautiful in its completeness. You could hear the catering staff in the back of the tent stop moving dishes just to listen to what was unfolding. Even the background music seemed to fade away. And of course, all eyes immediately turned to me, waiting to see how I would react to learning that my brother had been screwing my girlfriend. Marcus's face cycled through about 5 different emotions in the span of 2 seconds: confusion, panic, anger, and then this weird calculating look, like he was desperately trying to figure out how to spin this complete disaster into something manageable. "That's not," he started to say, but Jessica cut him off before he could get his damage control machine rolling. "Don't," she said sharply. "Just don't even try it. I have screenshots, Marcus. I have pictures of hotel receipts. I have text messages where you're planning secret meetups with her behind my back. Should I start reading them out loud for everyone to hear?" My mom's face went tight with that particular expression she gets when someone's about to embarrass the family reputation. "Jessica, this is hardly the appropriate time or place for this kind of discussion," she said in her most condescending tone. "When exactly would be the right time?" Jessica shot back without missing a beat. "After we're married? After I've wasted even more years of my life on a cheater who thinks I'm too stupid to figure out what he's doing?" Marcus tried to step closer to Jessica, probably thinking he could deploy his usual charm offensive to calm her down and regain control of the situation. "Jessica, please, whatever you think you saw," he began in that smooth, condescending tone he uses when he's trying to gaslight someone. "I know exactly what I saw," Jessica interrupted, her voice getting stronger and more confident with each word. She turned to look directly at me, and I could see a mixture of sympathy and determination in her eyes. "Your fiancé has been screwing my girlfriend for months," she announced to the entire table. "I'm sorry, Tyler, you deserve to know what kind of people you've been trusting with your heart." The whole table swiveled in unison to stare at me like I was some kind of zoo exhibit, waiting with bated breath for me to lose my shit, start throwing punches, or make some big dramatic scene about betrayal and heartbreak. The anticipation was almost palpable. They wanted to see the younger brother finally snap and provide them with some real entertainment. Instead, I just took a slow, deliberate sip from my glass of wine and gave a little nod, as casual as if someone had just told me it might rain tomorrow. "Yeah, I know," I said in the most matter-of-fact tone I could manage. Marcus's panic immediately shifted to complete confusion. His mouth actually fell open a little, and he stared at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. "You knew?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. "Of course I knew," I replied calmly. "For how long?" he pressed, clearly trying to figure out what game I was playing and how much damage control he needed to do. "Couple of weeks now," I said with a shrug. The family was looking back and forth between Marcus and me like they were watching a tennis match, their heads turning in perfect synchronization. Marcus was clearly trying to process this information, probably wondering what angle I was working and whether I had some kind of plan he hadn't anticipated. But here's the thing that nobody at that table saw coming. I wasn't done dropping bombshells. Not even close. Jessica had just handed me the perfect opening for what I'd really been planning for months. Mom immediately went into full damage control mode, talking rapidly about how families work through problems together and how we should handle all of this privately like civilized people instead of airing our dirty laundry in front of the extended family. Dad was looking around the table with this bewildered expression, like someone was going to tell him this was all an elaborate practical joke and we could get back to celebrating. But Jessica wasn't backing down or letting them sweep this under the rug. If anything, she was getting more fired up and determined to expose the truth. "The worst part isn't even the cheating," she said, her voice cutting through my mother's attempts at peacekeeping. "It's that your mother knew about it the entire time." Every head at the table turned toward Mom like she had just confessed to murder. Mom went pale as a sheet, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "I don't know what you're talking about," Mom said weakly, but her voice was shaky and completely unconvincing. "You called me last week," Jessica said, her voice getting louder and more accusatory. "You told me that Marcus was going through a rough patch with work stress and that I should be understanding if he seemed distant or distracted lately. You knew he was cheating on me. And you tried to manipulate me into ignoring it so your precious son wouldn't face any consequences." The family started shifting uncomfortably in their seats, finally beginning to realize that this wasn't just about Marcus's infidelity anymore. This was about the entire system that had been protecting him and enabling his behavior while throwing everyone else under the bus for his entire life. "I was trying to protect the family," Mom said weakly. Her usual confidence completely evaporated. "You were trying to protect Marcus," Jessica fired back without hesitation. "Like you always do. Like you've always done his entire life no matter who gets hurt in the process." That's when I decided it was finally time. Time to stop being the invisible younger brother who takes the blame for everything. Time to stop letting Marcus get away with destroying people's lives while I sit quietly in the background. Time to drop the real nuclear bomb I'd been sitting on for months, just waiting for the perfect moment to detonate it. I stood up slowly and deliberately, taking my time and letting the moment build. Everyone at the table looked at me expectantly, probably thinking I was going to make some emotional speech about Victoria and how betrayed I felt. Or maybe break down crying about my broken heart and shattered trust. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened the folder I'd been meticulously building since I discovered Marcus's criminal activities. "Since we're sharing family secrets tonight," I said, my voice calm and level, "there's something else everyone should know about Marcus." Marcus's eyes went wide with genuine terror. He knew I had something serious on him, but he had absolutely no idea what it was or how devastating it might be. The panic was starting to creep back into his face, and I could see him mentally scrambling to figure out what I might have discovered. "Marcus has been stealing from the construction company," I announced, letting that bombshell sink in for a moment before continuing. "Embezzling funds, falsifying project records, and running elaborate scams on our clients. The whole operation." The reaction was immediate and intense. Gasps echoed from the aunts and uncles. Dad's face went bright red like he was about to have a stroke, and relatives started murmuring frantically to each other. Marcus looked like he might actually throw up right there on the pristine white tablecloth. "That's complete bullshit," Marcus said desperately, but his voice cracked on the last word, betraying his panic. "Tyler's just trying to get back at me for the Victoria situation. He's making this up out of spite." "Am I?" I asked calmly, starting to scroll through my phone to access the damning evidence I'd collected. "Because I've got bank records right here. Company credit card statements. Receipts from strip clubs where Marcus takes our married clients for business meetings." "You're lying," Mom said. But she was looking directly at Marcus when she said it, not at me. Even she could see the guilt written all over his face. "Paradise Lounge. Diamond Dreams. Golden Palace." I read off my phone methodically. Marcus has been taking married clients to these establishments, charging their companies astronomical fees for entertainment and consultation services, then pocketing the difference. A $40,000 project magically becomes a $70,000 invoice. Marcus keeps 30 grand for himself. The client thinks they're getting VIP treatment and exclusive access, and their company pays whatever Marcus tells them to pay because they trust our family's reputation. Marcus was starting to sweat visibly now, probably running through his limited options and realizing they were all absolutely terrible. "Those were legitimate business expenses," he said weakly, grasping for any possible explanation that might save him. "Business expenses?" I had to laugh at the absurdity of it. "What kind of construction business are we conducting at strip clubs, Marcus? Are we building structures for the dancers now? Installing custom poles and lighting systems?" Dad finally found his voice, and when he spoke, it was quiet and dangerously controlled. The same tone he used to use when we were kids and someone was about to get the belt. "How much money are we talking about, Tyler?" I scrolled through my meticulously organized documentation, adding up the numbers I'd been tracking for months. "About $95,000 over the past year and a half," I said. "Maybe more. I'm still going through some of the older records and finding new discrepancies." The number hit the table like a physical blow. $95,000? Enough money to buy a house outright? Enough to send a kid to college for 4 years? Enough to expand the business legitimately and hire additional crews? All of it gone. Pissed away on strip clubs and fraudulent billing schemes so Marcus could maintain his reputation as a successful businessman. "Marcus," Dad said, his voice carrying that tone he used to use when we were children and someone was about to face serious consequences. I was genuinely surprised that Dad was actually capable of using this authoritative tone on his precious golden boy. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again like a fish gasping for air. For the first time in his entire life, he couldn't talk his way out of a situation. The golden boy who had always had a perfectly crafted excuse, always had a compelling story, and always had someone else to blame for his mistakes, was completely and utterly speechless. "I can explain," Marcus finally managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. "Explain what?" I shot back, not giving him a chance to regain his composure or get his bearings. "How you've been robbing your own family to pay for your strip club addiction? How you've been defrauding clients who trust us with their business? How you've been building your supposedly brilliant reputation on stolen money and completely fake project numbers." This was definitely my moment to shine, and I was absolutely savoring every second of it. Marcus was desperately trying to think fast and come up with some kind of explanation that might save him, but he'd never been good under real pressure. When things got truly difficult, Marcus usually just blamed someone else and let them deal with the consequences while he walked away clean. "It's not what it looks like," he said desperately, his usual confidence completely shattered. "The clients wanted the entertainment. They specifically requested it. I was just giving them what they asked for and what they were willing to pay for. By overcharging them 50% and keeping the difference for yourself? I pressed, not letting him off the hook. The entertainment industry has high overhead costs, he started to say, but I cut him off before he could build any momentum. Cut the shit, Marcus, I said firmly. You're a thief and a fraud, and now everyone at this table knows exactly what you really are. Jessica had been watching this entire exchange with a look of disgust mixed with deep satisfaction, like she was finally seeing Marcus for what he truly was, instead of what he had always pretended to be. Strip clubs, she said, her voice dripping with contempt. You've been stealing money from your own family to take married men to strip clubs, while you're engaged to me. It's not personal, Marcus said weakly, grasping for any argument that might minimize the damage. It's just business. It's just part of how you build relationships with clients in this industry. It's theft, I stated flatly, and fraud, and probably a dozen other felonies that are going to send you to prison for a very long time. That's when my family showed their true colors in the most predictable way possible. Instead of being horrified that Marcus was a criminal, instead of demanding that he make things right and face the consequences of his actions, they immediately started trying to protect him and minimize the damage to his reputation. Now hold on, Dad said, standing up and holding his hands out like he was trying to calm everyone down and regain control of the situation. Let's not make any hasty decisions here. Marcus made some poor choices, but poor choices? I couldn't believe what I was hearing from my own father. Dad, he stole nearly $100,000 from our family business. That's not a poor choice. That's a crime. Marcus has been under tremendous pressure, Mom chimed in, like that somehow made theft and fraud acceptable. The stress of managing difficult clients, planning a wedding, trying to live up to everyone's expectations. Are you seriously defending him right now? Jessica's voice cut through their pathetic attempts at damage control. He cheated on me. He stole from your family. He defrauded your clients. And you're still making excuses for him? Marcus has made mistakes, Dad said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone he uses when he wants to end a discussion. But he's still family. We protect family in this household. You protect Marcus, I corrected him sharply. You've been protecting Marcus his entire life while throwing me under the bus every single time he screws up. That's not fair, Tyler, Dad said, but his protest sounded weak even to his own ears. Isn't it? I challenged him. Remember when Marcus crashed your truck in high school? And somehow I got grounded for 3 weeks for not stopping him? Remember when he failed 3 classes his senior year, and you blamed me for not setting a better example as his younger brother? Remember when he got fired from his first job for showing up late constantly, and you said it was because I didn't support him enough? The table went completely quiet again. Even the relatives who had been whispering frantically among themselves shut up to listen to this confrontation that had been building for years. Marcus has always been the golden child, I continued, my voice getting stronger and more confident. No matter what he does, no matter who he hurts, no matter how many people's lives he destroys, you always find a way to make it someone else's fault. Usually mine. We love both our sons equally, Mom said, but even she didn't sound convinced by her own words. Do you? I asked pointedly. Because I've been running the day-to-day operations of the construction company for 3 years now, while Marcus shows up for client lunches and family photo opportunities. I've been handling all the real work while Marcus takes credit and steals money. But somehow he's still the one who's going to inherit everything. Marcus had been staying relatively quiet during this heated exchange between me and our parents, probably hoping that the focus would shift away from his criminal activities and onto our family dynamics instead. But now he saw what he thought might be an opening to regain some control of the situation. "What do you want, Tyler?" he asked, like this was all just some kind of business negotiation that could be resolved with the right offer. I looked around the table slowly and deliberately, taking in all the faces staring at me with a mixture of shock, curiosity, and apprehension. My parents, who had just spent 15 minutes defending a thief and a fraud simply because he was their favorite son. My brother, who had stolen from his own family and cheated on his fiancée without a second thought. The relatives who had watched me get treated like garbage for years and never said a single word in my defense. I want what's rightfully mine, I said simply and clearly. I want the construction company. I want Marcus completely gone from the business. And I want every single penny he stole paid back with full interest. You can't be serious, Mom said, like I had just suggested we sacrifice Marcus to ancient pagan gods. It's not that simple, Dad added, clearly panicking about the implications of what I was demanding. I'm dead serious, I replied calmly. Because here's the thing that none of you seem to understand yet. I already filed a police report. Marcus is looking at serious felony charges. Marcus's face went completely white, like all the blood had suddenly drained from his head. "You called the cops?" he asked in disbelief. "Filed a formal complaint yesterday morning," I confirmed. "Embezzlement, fraud, theft by deception. Turns out the police take this kind of thing pretty seriously, even when it's family." The explosion that followed was everything I had hoped for and so much more. Marcus started yelling about betrayal, and how could I possibly do this to him after everything we'd been through as brothers? Mom immediately burst into tears, crying about how I was destroying the family over money and letting petty jealousy turn me into someone cruel and vindictive. Dad was desperately trying to play peacekeeper, while clearly panicking about what this scandal would mean for the business's reputation and financial future. The relatives were all talking over each other, with about half of them expressing outrage at Marcus's criminal behavior and the other half directing their anger at me for exposing it publicly. But Jessica just looked at me with something that might have been genuine respect, maybe even admiration. "Good," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear over the chaos erupting around the table. "Someone in this family finally has some backbone." She reached down calmly, pulled off her engagement ring with deliberate precision, and set it on the white tablecloth directly in front of Marcus. "We're done, Marcus," she said with quiet finality. "Don't call me, don't text me, don't show up at my apartment uninvited. If you want to be a lying, cheating thief, you can do it without me." And just like that, in the span of about 15 minutes, Marcus lost his fiancée, his inheritance, and his freedom all at once. It was honestly the best engagement party I'd ever attended. That expensive suit I'd bought specifically for this occasion was definitely worth every penny for such a classy and memorable evening. The aftermath in the following week was exactly what you'd expect from a family drama of this magnitude. My phone was ringing constantly with relatives wanting to get the latest gossip. Family friends trying to piece together the real story from conflicting accounts and people I hadn't talked to in years who were suddenly very interested in hearing my side of the events. But the core family itself immediately circled the wagons around Marcus, just like I knew they would. Mom called me first, naturally. She was crying hysterically about how I was systematically destroying the family over money and letting petty jealousy turn me into someone heartless and cruel. When I calmly pointed out that Marcus was the one who had destroyed everything by choosing to steal and cheat, she just cried even harder and accused me of being vindictive and completely heartless. Dad showed up at my apartment on Tuesday night, looking like he'd aged about 10 years since the engagement party. He just pushed past me into my living room without being invited and sat down on my couch like he owned the place. "We need to talk," he said in his most serious tone. "Do we?" I replied. "Because last I checked, your son is a thief who's about to face serious criminal charges." "He's your brother too," Dad said, like that somehow changed the fundamental facts of the situation. "Marcus stopped being my brother the minute he decided to steal from our family and screw my girlfriend behind my back," I told him flatly. We went around in circles for about an hour, with Dad making increasingly desperate excuses and talking about family loyalty and forgiveness, while I kept pointing out that $95,000 isn't just an error in judgment. It's a serious crime with real consequences. Finally, Dad got to the real reason he had come to my apartment. "Drop the charges," he said, his voice taking on a pleading tone I'd never heard from him before. "We'll figure out a way for Marcus to pay the money back gradually. He can take a smaller role in the company, maybe work his way back up and prove himself again." "Absolutely not," I said without hesitation. "Tyler, be reasonable here," he pressed. "I am being reasonable," I replied firmly. Reasonable people don't steal nearly $100,000 from their own family's business. Reasonable people face the consequences of their criminal actions. Dad left that night looking completely defeated, but I could tell he wasn't giving up on trying to save his precious golden boy. This was just the opening move in what was clearly going to be a long, drawn-out campaign to get me to back down and let Marcus off the hook. Meanwhile, Marcus was spiraling completely out of control. I heard through mutual friends that he'd been calling Jessica constantly, sometimes dozens of times per day, and showing up at her apartment building at all hours begging her to take him back and give him another chance. She'd blocked his number after the second day and threatened to get a restraining order if he didn't stop harassing her and leave her alone. Victoria tried calling me too, probably finally realizing that her meal ticket had just gotten arrested and she needed to find a new source of financial support. She left a bunch of increasingly desperate voicemails about how sorry she was about everything that had happened and how we really needed to talk about what had actually transpired between her and Marcus. I deleted every single message without listening to the whole thing. The legal proceedings moved much faster than I had expected. It turns out that when you have comprehensive bank records, detailed company credit card statements, and witness testimony from employees who had observed Marcus's client entertainment schemes firsthand. Building a solid criminal case is pretty straightforward for prosecutors. Marcus's arraignment was scheduled for a Wednesday morning. I decided not to attend, but I heard through the family grapevine that he showed up in handcuffs looking absolutely terrified. He pled not guilty, obviously, but his overworked public defender looked like he'd rather be literally anywhere else in the world. The judge set his bail at $60,000, which Marcus didn't have lying around, seeing as how he'd blown most of his stolen money on strip clubs and expensive dinners with clients. He had to sit in the county lockup for 4 days before Dad finally scraped together the bail money by taking out a substantial loan against the construction business. While Marcus was dealing with felony charges and trying not to get attacked in jail, I was meeting with the construction company's board of directors. It was just a small group. Dad, Uncle Pete, who handles our financing and accounting, Cousin Jim, who runs our equipment department, and Mrs. Chen, our business attorney who'd been with the company for over a decade. The meeting was supposedly about the Marcus situation and how to handle the public relations nightmare. But really, it was about determining who was going to run the company while the supposed heir was facing 6 to 12 years in prison. "We need someone in charge who can actually manage the day-to-day operations," Uncle Pete said bluntly. He'd been doing our books for 18 years and knew exactly how little Marcus actually contributed to the real work. Tyler's been handling most of the genuine responsibilities for the past 3 years anyway. The clients know him, the employees respect him, Cousin Jim added supportively. And he actually understands the construction business instead of just schmoozing with people over expensive lunches. Dad tried to argue, of course. He talked about how Marcus was still technically the designated heir, how we shouldn't make permanent decisions based on what he called temporary problems, and how family businesses need to stick together during difficult times and weather the storm. But Mrs. Chen shut that argument down immediately. "Marcus is facing multiple serious felony charges," she said in her no-nonsense attorney voice. "Even if he somehow beats them, which is extremely unlikely given the overwhelming evidence, no bank is going to work with us while he's involved in the business. We need clean, trustworthy leadership if we want to survive this scandal." The vote was 4-1, with Dad as the only holdout. Just like that, I was officially running the family business that Marcus had always assumed he would inherit someday. My first order of business was conducting a thorough house cleaning of everyone Marcus had brought into the company over the past few years. I fired his drinking buddies who consistently showed up late and did half-ass work on important projects. I got rid of his strip club contacts who had somehow ended up on our official payroll as consultants and specialists, despite having no legitimate construction experience. I terminated the project managers who had known about his client entertainment scams and kept their mouths shut in exchange for a cut of the illegal profits. I cleaned house completely and systematically. If you had been part of Marcus's corrupt operation in any way, you were gone immediately. My second order of business was changing every single security measure at the company. I had all the locks changed, all the computer passwords reset, and all the access codes updated. Marcus was officially banned from company property pending the outcome of his criminal trial, and I made sure everyone knew that policy would be strictly enforced. The business started turning around almost immediately, which was honestly remarkable to witness. It's funny how much more profitable a company becomes when nobody is systematically stealing from it, and nobody is running elaborate fraud schemes that could blow up and destroy your reputation at any moment. We started finishing projects on time and under budget for the first time in years. We began giving clients honest, fair quotes instead of Marcus's inflated nonsense designed to maximize his personal profit. We started building a solid reputation based on quality work and honest dealing instead of strip clubs and under-the-table kickbacks. Our clients noticed the dramatic difference right away. Word started spreading throughout the industry that we were running a clean, professional operation again. Within just 3 months, we had more legitimate business than we could realistically handle, and I had to start hiring additional crews to meet the demand. That's when Victoria decided to make her pathetic move. She showed up at my apartment on a Friday night wearing this tight red dress that used to drive me absolutely crazy, carrying a bouquet of expensive flowers like we were old friends getting together for a pleasant reunion. "Hey, stranger," she said when I opened the door, giving me that practiced smile that probably still worked on guys with less self-respect than I'd developed. "What do you want?" I asked bluntly. "Can't I just visit an old friend? See how you're doing?" she said, trying to sound casual. I heard about what happened with Marcus in the business situation. I looked at her carefully, really studied her face and body language. She was still pretty, sure, But there was something genuinely desperate in her eyes now, something calculating and predatory. It was the kind of look you see on people who have completely run out of options and are frantically trying to figure out their next angle for survival. "Marcus is broke," I said matter-of-factly. "He's facing serious jail time. And suddenly you remember that I exist." Her practiced smile faltered just a little bit, revealing the desperation underneath. "That's not... I mean, yes, Marcus and I had a thing for a while, but it's completely over now. I realized I made a terrible mistake choosing him over you. You realize Marcus can't afford to take you to fancy hotels anymore," I said, cutting through her bullshit. "Now that he can't steal money to pay for your expensive tastes." "Don't be like that, Tyler," she said, trying to sound hurt. "What we had together was real. We can have that again." Real, right? Real to Victoria had meant expensive dinners at upscale restaurants, designer gifts that cost more than most people's rent, and vacations to exotic places she could post about on Instagram to make her friends jealous. All the expensive lifestyle accessories that Marcus had been buying with stolen money from our family business. "You know what's real?" I said, stepping closer to the doorway. "Real is not screwing your boyfriend's brother for months while pretending everything is fine at family dinners." Victoria's face hardened slightly, and I could see her mask starting to slip. "You weren't exactly ambitious back then," she said with a hint of her true nature showing through. "Marcus had real prospects, a promising future. He was going places. Marcus had stolen money," I corrected her. "There's a significant difference." "And now you have money," she said, her desperation becoming more obvious. "You have the business, the respect, the bright future that Marcus was supposed to have. It's weird how things change, isn't it?" She wasn't wrong in her shallow, materialistic way. I did have money now, real money that I'd earned legitimately. I had power and respect in the industry, and a promising future that didn't depend on anyone else's approval or support. But none of that success had come from Marcus or from my family's belated recognition. I'd earned every bit of it by being the one person willing to tell the truth when it actually mattered. "You're absolutely right," I said, nodding. "I do have money now. Money I earned by working hard instead of stealing from my own family. Success I built by being honest and reliable instead of running elaborate scams. A reputation based on actual accomplishments instead of fraud and theft." "So we could try again," she said hopefully. "Start fresh with a clean slate. Put all the drama and mistakes behind us." I stepped closer to her, and for a brief moment she probably thought I was going to invite her inside and give her another chance. Instead, I started slowly closing the door. "But you missed one crucial thing, Victoria," I said calmly. "I don't let gold diggers profit off my success anymore. Get lost." She tried to argue with me, desperately starting to talk about second chances and how much she claimed she'd missed me during her time with Marcus. But I just kept steadily closing the door until she finally got the message and left my doorstep. That same night, I decided to call Jessica. We'd been talking casually since the engagement party disaster, just coffee meetings here and there, getting to know each other as individuals without Marcus constantly being in the way and controlling every interaction. It turned out that when she wasn't constantly managing my brother's massive ego and pretending that everything in their relationship was perfect, she was genuinely funny, incredibly smart, and refreshingly real in ways that Marcus had never bothered to appreciate or encourage. "Good day?" she asked when she picked up the phone. "The best," I replied. "Marcus's ex-girlfriend tried to win me back tonight." "Oh God, how did that conversation go?" she asked with obvious amusement. "I told her to get lost," I said. "Turns out when you actually respect yourself, it becomes much easier to spot people who don't." "Smart man," she said warmly. "So what happens now?" "Now I keep building something that's actually worth having," I said. "Maybe ask out this amazing woman who deserves way better than my piece of shit brother ever gave her." There was a thoughtful pause on the other end of the line, and then Jessica laughed. A warm, genuine sound that I realized I'd been wanting to hear more of. "I thought you'd never ask," she said. 8 months later, Marcus finally accepted a plea deal from the prosecutors. He got 6 years in minimum security prison, full restitution of every penny he'd stolen, and a permanent ban from working in the construction industry anywhere in the state. He'd be eligible for parole in 4 years if he behaved himself and stayed out of trouble. The family was absolutely devastated, naturally. Mom still blamed me entirely for the situation, insisting that I had destroyed Marcus's life over money and petty jealousy. Dad was more realistic about the situation. He could see that Marcus had ultimately destroyed himself through his own criminal choices, but he still thought I'd been unnecessarily harsh in pursuing criminal charges instead of handling it privately within the family. But honestly, I didn't care what they thought anymore. I had a thriving business to run, a relationship with someone who actually deserved my time and energy, and a future that was completely my own to control. Jessica and I got serious pretty quickly after that phone call, and it wasn't because we were rebounding from bad relationships or trying to hurt Marcus somehow. It was because we genuinely enjoyed each other's company in ways that felt natural and effortless. She made me laugh in ways I'd forgotten were even possible. She called me out on my bullshit without making me feel terrible about myself. She supported my decisions and ambitions without trying to micromanage my life or take control of everything. The family situation remained complicated and tense. Mom and Dad kept trying to maintain some kind of superficial relationship with me, but it was mostly surface-level interactions at this point. We'd exchange holiday cards, have awkward phone calls about business matters, and make forced small talk when we accidentally ran into each other around town. They'd ask polite questions about Jessica, and I'd give short, non-committal answers. They'd mention that Marcus was doing okay in prison, and I'd immediately change the subject. We all pretended this was normal family interaction, but everyone involved knew that the real relationship had died completely the night Marcus got arrested. I was finally done pretending we were close just because we happened to share the same DNA. A year later, Jessica and I got married. We had a small, intimate ceremony with just our closest friends and the family members who had actually supported us through the whole ordeal. My parents came to the wedding, awkwardly trying to rebuild the bridges they had burned with their unconditional defense of Marcus. Uncle Pete walked Jessica down the aisle since her father had passed away a few years earlier. Cousin Jim served as my best man. At the reception, Dad pulled me aside for a private conversation. "I owe you a sincere apology," he said, his voice heavy with genuine regret. "For years of putting Marcus first in everything. For not seeing what you were truly capable of achieving. For not protecting you the way I should have as your father." "Thanks, Dad. That actually means something coming from you," I replied. "The business is in better hands than I ever thought possible," he continued. "You've turned it around completely and built something I'm genuinely proud of." Coming from him, that was basically a declaration of love and respect that I'd been waiting my entire life to hear. Mom was much harder to deal with and forgive. She still fundamentally believed that I'd been too harsh on Marcus, still convinced that family should forgive absolutely anything, no matter how destructive or criminal. But she was at least making an effort to repair our relationship. She started asking genuine questions about Jessica, showing real interest in the business operations, and making a visible effort to see me as something other than Marcus's disappointing little brother who had betrayed the family. 2 years after our wedding, Jessica and I had our first child, a beautiful daughter we named after Jessica's grandmother. Marcus was still locked up in prison, obviously, and honestly, the world felt like a much better and safer place without him in it. The construction business kept growing and expanding at an incredible pace. We opened a second location across town, added a concrete division to handle larger commercial projects, and even landed a major contract with the city for their infrastructure maintenance program. Everything that Marcus had always assumed he was going to inherit, I had built from the ground up through honest work, fair dealing, and treating people with respect. Marcus was finally released from prison last year. I heard through the family grapevine that he'd moved to Nevada immediately after his release and was working manual labor jobs, keeping his head down and staying out of trouble. Good for him, I suppose. I genuinely hope he learned something meaningful from the experience and found a way to become a better person. But honestly, I don't really care one way or the other what happens to him now. Marcus spent the first 24 years of my life treating me like absolute garbage, stealing credit for my work, and letting me take the blame for his countless mistakes and failures. When he finally got caught, when his entire fake life came crashing down around him, when he desperately needed someone to save him from the consequences of his own criminal actions, I didn't save him. I didn't throw him a lifeline. I watched him drown in his own choices and felt nothing but profound relief. Jessica and I are rock solid now. Better than solid. We're true partners in every sense of the word. She runs the business and administrative side of the company while I handle the operations and field work. Our daughter is 4 years old now, and she's smart and confident in ways I never was at her age. We're seriously talking about having another child soon. The construction company now has 5 locations throughout the state. We've become the biggest independent contractor in the region, built entirely on a foundation of honest work and fair prices. The complete opposite of everything Marcus had represented. Dad officially retired last year and handed me full legal control of the company in a ceremony at the country club. Interestingly, Marcus's name never came up once during the entire event, which felt exactly right. People sometimes ask me if I ever think about Marcus. wonder how he's doing, or feel guilty about destroying his life so completely and permanently? The answer is absolutely not. Marcus destroyed his own life by choosing to be a lying, cheating thief who hurt everyone around him. I just made sure there were real consequences for his actions instead of letting him get away with it like everyone always had before. You know what I think about instead? Whether my daughter will grow up feeling genuinely loved unconditionally by both her parents. Whether she'll understand that real success comes from hard work and treating people with respect, not from stepping on other people and stealing what doesn't belong to you. Whether she'll have the backbone to walk away from toxic people who try to use and manipulate her, even if those people happen to be family members. Because people always say that blood is thicker than water. But that's complete bullshit in my experience. Real family isn't about shared DNA or biological connections. It's about who actually shows up when you need them. It's about who genuinely has your back when things get difficult. It's about who treats you like you matter as a human being. Marcus never did any of those things for me. Not once in 24 years. So when he needed me most, when his whole world was falling apart, I wasn't there for him either. Some people call that revenge. I call it justice. And 6 years later, I'm still sleeping perfectly fine at night, knowing I made the right choice for myself and my real family.